Welcome. I'm Bob Moeller, your president of the Fchoa Board of Directors, and I want to welcome you for participating in our Meet the Candidates virtual forum. In normal times, we'd be meeting in person at the S&T. We've had two meetings to introduce the candidates to you and let them answer your questions and talk about themselves. But this is not normal times, as we all know. So thank you for bearing with us as we try and navigate this COVID era. I want to thank Denise Nugent and her committee for doing a great job of pulling this all together and figuring out a process by which we can do this virtually and get the information to you. So Denise and your committee, thank you much. They put together a wonderful bunch of candidates for us, a slate of candidates. We have 5 very talented people, very exceptional people to man the board next year. And for that, I want to thank each and every one of the candidates for agreeing to volunteer and keep participating as part of FCHOA for the betterment of it. I also want to thank you, residents, for participating. If you're watching this and you are participating, and I'm sure that you'll vote for the candidate of your choice. So once again, thank you very much for participating. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to your moderator, Denise Nugent. Denise?
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. Welcome and thank you, residents, for viewing the 2021 Meet the Candidate webcast. As Bob indicated, my name is Denise Nugent. I'm the chair of the HOA Nominating Committee and the moderator of the Meet the Candidate webcast. With us today, we have 3 other members of the Nominating Committee who may have their cameras off. Bob Bott, our database manager, who is acting as our official timer today, Earl Kleiser, who is our candidate liaison, and Terry Weiss, who is our communications manager. Sally Walls and Amanda Buckley from Community Services also are present with their cameras off and are recording this webcast for us. As Bob indicated, we're pleased to have 5 very well-qualified candidates running for 4 seats on the 2021 Board of Directors. I would like to introduce them. Rick Beers, Bob Boggio, Daphne Kinkle, Roy Madsen, and Ray Van Cott. In early December, we recorded the candidates' introductory statements on fchoa.org, so we're ready to move into the next phase of the Meet the Candidate webcast, which is our question and answer session. Before we start, I would like to take a few minutes to explain the format of our meeting. For a 3-week duration in December, the Nominating Committee solicited questions from residents for the question and answer session. We received over 30 questions from residents. The Nominating Committee consolidated and grouped the questions by like topics. Just as in past Meet the Candidate forums, the candidates have not seen the questions ahead of time. To ensure questions to candidates are selected in a random manner, I will pick questions from a fishbowl containing all the residents' questions. To move the meeting along smoothly, I will call on the candidates in alphabetical order to respond to questions. For example, Rick Beers will be asked the first question, and then everyone else in alphabetical order will have a chance to respond. The second question will go to Bob Boggio, and then Daphne Kinkle, Roy Madsen, Ray Van Cott, and Rick Beers in that order will have a chance to respond. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to a question. Our question and answer session will last for about an hour, and then we will move to the candidates' closing statements. Okay, the first question is going to go to Rick Beers, and the topic is budget finance. The past 3 years, we have had a special assessment in addition to the regular assessment. One was to purchase the parcel near the CSB, and the last 2 were to fund drainage pipe relining and placement. Are special assessments the new normal? Rick?
I don't think so. I think that in the first place, with regards to the special assessment itself, it was definitely and certainly brought on by the discovery that our infrastructure, our pipe infrastructure, needed major rehaul. You all know the details on pipes. We have the pipe expert on this call, Ray, and it was an absolute necessity. So what we did was we took a look at the funding that we had in place through the capital reserve to fund part of that repair, and there was a shortfall. So we had the choice of either borrowing, which we're certainly not going to do that. We had the choice of increasing assessments on an ongoing basis, and we didn't want to do that. What we wanted to do was have a funding mechanism that was targeted and trackable, and that's why the special assessments occurred last year and this year. If, and this is a major if, things go to plan, if our forecasts are correct, that may very well be it for special assessments. There may still be surprises down the road. These pipes are underground. But right now, it looks as if these two special assessments should be sufficient to cover us through the majority of the work to come over the next 6 years.
Thank you, Rick. Bob Boggio.
Rick did a good job of summarizing where we were with the pipes. I don't have anything specific to add to it.
Okay, thank you. Daphne?
I think the question also asked whether this was going to be the new norm, and I think Rick identified the reason for the last two, and how difficult it is to make these decisions. In terms of the general view of special assessments, it's my impression that the HOA does not endorse this as a method of funding things from time to time. These are not decisions that are taken lightly. The Finance Committee was a part of this year's decision, and wow, it was not done lightly. So I do not believe this is the new norm.
Roy Messon?
I'll just add a couple of points. First of all, you talked about parcels A, B, and C in the question. One of the ways to look at that is that represented an opportunity for the colony, not necessarily something that needed to be fixed. And if there isn't an opportunity for the colony that the whole colony can take advantage of, yes, indeed, we need to figure out a way to make that happen. And the way that happened was probably the right way of doing it. When it comes to the pipes, doing a great job. When somebody makes an assumption for 50 years for the life of pipes and they end up being 25 years, guess what? Somebody's going to have to pay something. That's what happened there. But I will add to this point is that I do think that the colony needs to have a better risk management approach to a lot of the things that it does. And the pipes are one thing that could have been looked at a while ago. I remember talk of the pipes under Ford's Colony Drive several years ago. We probably should have known a little bit more about this sooner than we did. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you, Roy. Ray Van Cott?
I think most of it's already been covered, but just to amplify what Roy just said, extraordinary events is what drives the special assessments. We certainly don't plan for special assessments, nor, frankly, do we like passing them. But there are occasions that it comes up. Roy is actually right. The A, B, and C parcel, which was really done, I think, had to be 3 or 4 years ago, was an opportunity to not only enhance our land holdings as a community, but to also stop some development that we may not have wanted to see. So that was opportune. I think we've spent a lot of time talking about pipes, and frankly, it's as Roy just said. If something happens that we have a useful life planning, whether it be 20 years, 50 years, 5 years, or 2 years, if it doesn't last, then we are going to be in a situation where we have to evaluate how we make all that right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ray. I've just picked the next question, and it's the same category, budget finance. And this question will first go to Bob Boggio. What strategies will you pursue to investigate ways to reduce operational costs in Ford's Colony?
I think in order to do cost reduction, I think you need to take a look at your costs and delve into the details associated with those costs, both labor and I'd say materials, for example. We've got a pretty good handle on where the money is being spent and where the focus could be. I think the committees have started taking some serious look at cost reduction. I think it's a beginning. And I think there's some activity that needs to be more focused in both areas, namely materials and labor. I've got quite a bit of background in cost reduction in my history of doing business. So what has actually transpired recently is a nice start. I think we need to have a little more focus and possibly take one of the board members as a key lead in pulling together some of the committee chairmen and doing a drill down on where the best opportunities for reductions are and implementing a plan. Focus on one and another, maybe a couple at a time.
Next, we'll go to Daphne.
Nicely said, Bob. I don't think I have anything to add.
Thank you. Roy Madsen.
I think that actually the Finance Committee and the folks have done actually a really nice job about trying to managing our finances. But when it comes to cost, I think we need to think about that in a little bit different way. Is that, yes, I am a CPA and I do have that occupational hazard. But having said that, is that I don't think we should be looking at it in a detailed way. Is that we perhaps should be looking at the way that we do our business and the models that we use and take a little bit longer view on what we do and how we do it. And, you know, so it isn't a matter about what we specifically spend. It's more a matter about how we are doing, what spending are we doing, okay? So, and I think that's something that both the board and the community itself needs to have some more input into as we go forward.
Thank you, Roy. Ray Van Cott.
So if we go back to this fiscal year, which just finished in 2020, and look at the formation of that budget, you'd hear, and if you look at some old minutes or talk of the colonies, the Finance Committee undertook almost a zero-based budgeting plan and basically told the committees to come up with, I believe the number was somewhere around 4 or 5% reduction of their total cost, and challenged committees to do that. The board then took the attitude that the committee, when they brought forward the 2020 budget, they had to address why they could make 5% or 4%, and it was up to the board to accept or reject those reasons. So I think that was probably the first attempt since I've been here for an aggressive approach to budgeting, and it was driven by the Finance Committee in 2019. The 2020 budget did come in under plan for a lot of reasons, COVID related as well. I think you always have to take an aggressive approach to budgeting and costs and make sure that you deliver what the residents of Ford's Colony want in the most efficient, cost-effective manner. And we try and do that every year, and it's something that you just don't sit back on your laurels and say, hey, we got it done. I mean, it's something you address every year, every time you're faced with a decision that implicates money. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Rick Beers.
I'd like to fill in a couple of blanks. As I was thinking ahead towards today, and the cost reduction discussion had to happen because it has to continually happen, and we need to treat cost reduction as an ongoing objective or an ongoing goal of the board. And I think an area that is really ripe is technology. I think that our technology base right now is probably 25 years old, similar to pipes. And the equipment that we have is really cries to be upgraded, as does the software. I'll give you an example, self-service. There's no reason we shouldn't be looking at self-service right now within the community, provide residents the opportunity to pay directly and to gain information without learning that easily. And I think that's one example or one idea that we could look at, and it probably extends a lot further than that. I think that another way to do this that I would like to see is not look at the budgetary categories, but look at the outcomes. This is pretty frequent or pretty common within business that we categorize what we want to do. And I think what we should be looking at is a horizontal view of our costs and look at what are our cost base right now to simply sustain what we have. What are our costs that are targeted at enhancing what we have, such as amenities? And what are the costs that we have that allow us to adapt to a changing environment? And if we take a look at our costs that way and decide what we want to be, I think we'd have a better view of our costs and our spending from an outcome standpoint. That got a little wonky, but it's a slightly different view, I think, that I'd like to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. We did have a lot of questions on budget finance from residents, but we're going to switch topics right now. And the next question is, the category is property values, and it'll first go to Daphne Kinkle. The question is, what are the drivers of value you would highlight regarding our real estate at Ford's Colony? Daphne?
Thanks. I think it comes down to perceived value. This is the old location thing. There's very little we can do about specific properties, but there's a lot that we can do about the community and how people regard it, how they perceive it, and whether they're prepared to pay a premium to live here. And I think the things that, for me, that we need to focus on are the physical assets, you know, the campus, recreational facilities. It's the first thing that people see. It's a driver of value. And so maintenance and upgrade where necessary and justified by, you know, a market change is definitely worthwhile. I think the other thing is, for the people who live here right now, community is very important. And I think it will remain important, but again, we may need to change some of the ways that we do things. Those are two drivers. There are a whole lot, but it's a very well sort of targeted question.
Thank you, Daphne. Roy?
I think Daphne did a nice job with that question. I'll just add a couple of points to what she said, is that if you take a look at the resident survey, is that you'll see that some of the things that you mentioned are really high on our residents' radar list. You know, the community, its beauty, its the activities, etc. Those are all very, very important for the people who live here. And as well, those are types of things that are mentioned in new resident surveys, okay? Is that those are the things that people are in fact looking for. And the more that we can increase the demand for Ford's Colony, is that the more the value will be sustained and increased. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Ray?
I think you have to keep in mind everything that just was said in front of me, but I would say freshness. I think, you know, and it's something that I've said a number of times, and I probably continue to say, you can't let the community get old. When you have something that's mature and it looks great, when it gets overgrown, it doesn't, and you actually have to refresh it. And I think, and that's what we need to try and do. We always have to be viewed as a beautiful, fresh, new type of community, especially when new ones are popping up. The other thing I think that goes along with that is enforcement of our codes and our building standards. I mean, a colonial house that was built 50 years ago should look like a colonial house built now. However, if you had A-frames were big in the 70s and 80s. Today, it wouldn't look appropriate. I think, you know, you have to have a sense of everything being fresh and new. And I think that we work hard to keep improving that and achieving it, as well as the things that Daphne and Roy mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
We feel that we have a dedicated set of realtors, more than dedicated, professional, and we rely upon them and they rely upon us, and it's a perfect relationship. And I think in terms of the house, the home, the properties themselves, we can't really do any better than we're doing in terms of the house sale itself. In terms of how we look as a community, as we look at a residential community, I agree certainly with the comments that have been made prior on the need to stay fresh, beautiful, secure. But there's also an element of area. As Daphne mentioned, location. Well, probably the first location is the region itself. Why would people want to move to Tidewater? Why would people want to move to the upper part of this peninsula? Why? What's the value that we can promote in terms of any material that's viewed externally? To do that, we need a better understanding of who the target audience is. the audience that we want to project ourselves to. And it doesn't mean having trade shows or anything like that. It means, how does our material look and feel? And the marketing committee is doing a wonderful job building that out. And I think the last thing is relevance, how to stay relevant to those people retiring, or those, more importantly, those people simply wanting to get out of Dodge. They want to move somewhere. Why would they want to move here? The here is the region, the location, and the community itself, which is Fort Colony. And how we stay relevant to a remote work environment is something that I'd really like to see us pursue, because it is a big deal right now.
Thank you. Bob Boggio?
I think the comments that have been made are pretty good. I'd like to add a little bit to what Rick had made regarding relevance. I think we need to look forward on what relevance is going to look like. Our community, and we've seen in the surveys, is populated with, I wouldn't call it aged, but some retired, some not retired, but in the more mature part of their lives. And we're trying to attract younger families with children, etc. And we've made some attempts at adjusting some of the privileges in the community to try to address children and things of that nature. We have a pretty good school system that's supported. I think we need to take a look at making this community a little more acceptable to the working family. And that would include the IT infrastructure. I think there's some not only improvements that need to be made on an aging infrastructure, but we need to take a look at making it a little more modern and looking forward to the kind of people that will be here in 5 years or longer, and making it more comfortable for the younger folks to make this community acceptable for them and more competitive with opportunities they have elsewhere in this area. So that's about all I have to say.
Thank you. The next question is on marketing. The topic is marketing, and it's going to first go to Roy Mattson. What would you propose to better market our FCHOA?
Well, first of all, we've made a pretty good start with that by creating the marketing committee, doing the surveys, having more interaction with our realtors, etc. But something else that we probably need to do falls on a little bit with what Bob was saying, is that, you know, right now there's a lot of opportunity, and actually new opportunity occurring. And I'll use COVID as an example. Is that prior to COVID, is that most people thought about working in an office. After COVID, more and more and more people are thinking about working at home. That represents an opportunity for Ford's Colony. That allows us to actually be in the play, if you will, where we would not have been before COVID. So those are the things that when we market the community, we've got to think about and figure out, for going back to who would move here, how they would use the facilities in this environment to facilitate their work, etc., to make it more in demand for them to come here. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Ray?
Roy actually said, I think the main thing the board recognized several years ago, before just about the time I was joining the board, of the need for a marketing committee and a more aggressive approach to our interactions with the various realtors that deal in Ford's Colony. And I think the marketing department has those guys have made an impact, and I think that will only increase. Looking forward is always the ideal, and probably one of the hardest things to do. You know, I do recall when I was working and living here, when we first got here, I was complaining bitterly about the technology availability, and why indeed didn't we have better than just Cox, who was the internet provider. And I thought that when we saw Marriott get fiber optic, and we saw it going in up, you know, being laid in Ford's Colony Drive, he said, we're going to be able to key off of that. And then Verizon basically came back and said, no, you're really not. We have a contract with Marriott we're going to honor, and we're not going to put the infrastructure in as we're waiting for 5G. And so when 5G comes in, 5G is wireless technology that gives you the speeds of perhaps of copper and fiber optic, and that's the next best thing. And I think that we should continue to aggressively pursue those types of opportunities with Verizon, and other providers to perhaps be on more of the leading edge, because technology is something that's very important to the working adult. At least it was to me, and I think it is to everyone who's here who wants to work from home. Being connected means you have to have, you have to have the infrastructure to do that. So I think we'll continue to look forward, and the marketing group is doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Rick Beers?
There are about 4 million people a year that are retiring. Those statistics are basically driven by the baby boom generation, the size of the generation, and when they're hitting age 65. We've looked at that number for years, and it's been stable. We know that in 6 years, that number falls off a cliff when we hit the baby bust generation, which started in 64. So we have a period of time where there's a stable number of people that are entering what we need to view or could view as a target audience to recruit people to come here. The nice thing, or the opportunity, has been brought up a couple of times before me, and that is the impact of COVID. We knew also, when I'm saying we, I mean I was part of a group that studied this a couple of years ago as part of the strategic plan development. We know that what we were calling at the time work from home was a growing opportunity for us to attract people. Now with COVID, it's accelerated it, and now the term is remote work. So that 4 million becomes greater, but that isn't going to last forever. We have a point in time right now that we really need to take advantage of to drive demand for the community. Driving demand drives value, as does all of the other internal work that we need to do. So the opportunity we have is to provide to people, why would they move into North Carolina? We know a lot is different that we can take advantage of. We know that we sit within 3 hour diameter, 3 hour radius of a huge technology base, military base of opportunities. Contractors will come here in droves. The location we have is, we're at a nexus. That's perfect. We're an oasis. That's perfect. There's a number of things we can do. And by the way, when people leave the gates, there is something else to see. Lot to market. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Bob Boggio?
I think enough's been said about this. I'd like to emphasize looking forward rather than staying stagnant in place. We've done a pretty good job of the environment, and we put that very high on our priority, and I think we just need to move the technology aspects a little bit higher in priority and spend some time focusing on that to make us more attractive.
Thank you. Daphne?
I think some great points have been made. For me, marketing really is about looking forward. It's about figuring out who your market might be and then what you need to do to approach it. Technology is clearly, let's be honest, whether you're a retiree, whether you're working at home, whether you're a young family with kids, you need the technology. I think that one's, pretty much something that we should focus on. But independent of marketing, I think we also need to think about what's happening in the Hampton Roads area. I would imagine that in time we're going to be part of a much larger metropolitan area. How does that affect us, and what kinds of people would like to live here versus living in another community? So I think this is a forward-looking exercise. And I'm not sure that it's confined or sort of a unique period in time because of COVID. I really think there are shifts in demographics locally and nationally that we can identify and start to plan for.
Thank you. The next question, the topic is multi-generational community. And the question is going to first go to Ray Van Cott. How important do you think it is for Ford's Colony to be a true multi-generational community?
We actually started talking about that when we talked about marketing. I mean, we're in the ending phase of the baby boomers coming down here. This place was marketed for retirement and was marketed for second homes for people out of the Washington D.C. area initially, and then it became a place for retirement. And why not? When you look at all the amenities that we have here, now you're looking forward. You have to consider what's next, and what's next is to continue to enhance our multi-generational facilities. And I think the board considers that when it makes its year, when it looks at where it's going to spend the money financially, what are we going to spend it on, right? And this year, the board elected, in one of its options to a water slide, because frankly, kids like water slides. I myself perhaps didn't vote for that because of a whole bunch of other reasons, but the fact is we need to consider everyone who lives here, and that's all the demographics. And to be fair, we have to look at each of the demographics in an equal manner. We've got right now about what I forget the number, somewhere around 20% of people who are not yet retired, and a certain small percentage of that with children. We have to have as park system, and you've seen the boards address that with playgrounds and the like. I think we have had a very aggressive liaison with the school systems, and the school systems are very important to multi-generation families to move in. That has to continue and frankly be enhanced. The school system, when you look for a place, when you look for a place with kids, you look at school systems first. And while ours is good, there's an argument made that our high school system that most of our children would go to is not great. So we have to continue to work with the school system to make that better. So it's something you always have to have in the back of your mind. We're a multi-generational community. We're committed to that, and we have to continue to do things that enhance that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Rick Beers?
There's also a question, or there's also a need as we expand as we expand the community's attraction to families with children, to remote workers. As we do that, we will also see the texture of the community change. People will be interested in different things. They'll want to communicate in different ways. And it feeds on itself, right? Once we start attracting those types of residents in a broader sense, they then come with needs that we have to meet. It's a virtuous cycle. And that's why it's so darn important to get started on it the way the board has over the last 2 years. Now the question is, how do we develop out the feel and the texture of the community? And a lot of that is going to be technology. A lot of that is going to be services. And one other thing, I think that's something we don't think about too often, is the ideal opportunity we have with respect to the country club. This place was constructed, designed, built during the time in which golf was the primary purpose for people looking for a place to move after they were done work. That's changed. Golf is still important, but golf is no longer the compelling need that many people have to move here. Certainly families with children, certainly remote workers, and the fact that we are not tied to the country club, the way communities such as Two Rivers, is something we need to promote more heavily. We have a great country club, and people have the option to join. And I think that's a terrific marketable capability for us to get at these younger generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Boccio?
I think we made a point about expanding and making it more comfortable for a working family to live here. We didn't say much about the attractions associated with basically the entire family, namely the children. An older community that we are, there's a couple examples that we've actually started to do something about that. First, I'd like to just highlight the fact that we've got a swimming program that attracts a lot of youth. and a couple pools, but there's attractions, and on occasions you can see meets take place, etc. It's very popular for children, and frankly, it doesn't cost us that much. Recently, the tennis club has finally started to reach out to youth. They've got a pretty good activity going on for training people, that are under, say, 13 years old. And if you're taking a look at some of the past talk of the colony, you can see that activity is pretty well populated. They've got some guys there that are pretty good at teaching and are pretty good at tennis. I think a lot of our clubs should start thinking a little bit about how they can enhance their attractiveness to the family, to the youth, and possibly both, the whole family environment. But I think the fact that we're starting to attract and deal with youth is a very excellent thing that's going to support us going forward for a multi-generational community.
Thank you. Daphne?
I think, again, some great points here. It seems to me that being multi-generational is critical. It does a couple of things. To be crass about it, it helps us sell houses. But even more important, I think it increases the quality of life for the rest of us. If we all just moved here and went out feet first in 30 years, this would get to be a pretty stale, boring kind of place. And so I think this refreshing and bringing in different kinds of people and different age groups is very healthy. And if we, as a first step, think about changing some of the things we do, like not have all our HOA meetings at 3 o'clock on a weekday afternoon, we can maybe encourage some of these people to join us and help us with these transitions. To help us figure out what makes sense, what would be worthwhile, and where we can start accommodating and helping people integrate. And I think that is going to be perhaps something that would help a great deal. Just the one step. Maybe we stop meeting at 3 o'clock on a weekday afternoon.
Thank you. Roy Mattson?
First of all, AM to the 3 p.m. meetings. Okay, I can't figure out where that came from, but we'll leave that alone. I want to go back and just actually attack the premise of this question. Ford's Colony is already a multi-generational community. Okay, there are actually 3 set constituencies in here. Okay, there is a younger constituency, which is made up of those families with children, okay, and those people who work. That's about 1/3 of the people who live here. About 11 or 12% of the people who live here are people that already have families. There's a big component of active retirees, okay? Those are people who are somewhere between 60 and 75 years old. That's the largest component. And then there is another component of about 25% or thereabouts, which is our older retirees. What's important to think about is that being multi-generational means that we actually address the needs of all of the groups, not just the younger group, not just the older group. And by addressing the needs of the group, it's really important for us to be able to understand what the needs of each of those groups are, and then allocate those resources accordingly in accordance with what our priorities are. Okay, yes, indeed, a slide is a great idea, and ways to increase activities for the younger folks is a good idea. Adding a kayak launching point may be a good idea for active retirees. Okay, having more bridge clubs, okay, may be a good idea for older retirees. But we need to address all of the generations whenever we talk about being a multi-generational community. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. The next question is a new topic, and it's architectural standards. The question is at the end. We have architectural standards and covenants that all residents, new and old, are supposed to abide by. As time has gone on, that is less the case. New homes go up and violations of the standards and covenants occur, some of which are too major to require correction. It appears that in those cases, variances are automatically granted. Minor covenant violations, i.e. house numbers, continue to occur, and again, no corrections to bring the violations in line seem to happen. Here's the question. How will you ensure our standards are enforced and future violations and associated variances are stopped? And this question will first go to Rick Beers.
Being the first one on this topic is interesting. Look, I'd approach it three ways, I think. And the first is the architectural guidelines themselves. Those guidelines were written primarily with a focus of new housing, new homes. How are new homes designed? What do they look like? How do they fit into the specific sub neighborhood or sub community that they're in? The target was was building. I think we need to take a look at those and take it from the approach of a mature community, how we keep fresh. How do we stay fresh? And then we have to start worrying about things that have come up, Denise, in your question. I think the second way, or the second target, are the covenants themselves. And right now, I think they have not been reviewed since 2012 or 2013. I think a goal, I'm really interested in seeing us review those covenants this year to see how relevant they are to a community that is building out. And finally, the question of enforcement. And this is the one that gets the most difficult. What is reasonable? What do we push? There's no right answer here. There really isn't. We need to balance the needs of the community, the HOA, against the needs of individual residents. And it's very difficult for some covenants to be taken literally. It really is. Take parking on the street, for example. How do we take that one literally? So I think if we take it from three direct, so I guess the point is covenants, once one has to worry about enforcement, the first two didn't do their job, which is review architectural standards and review covenants, and then deal with the outliers through enforcement.
Thank you. Bob Boccio?
Interesting question. I think the architectural reviews that we have are fine for the new builds. I've seen some occasions, even in my own neighborhood, where the issue isn't the new build, it's someone taking over an existing house that may have been here for, say, 20 years, and deciding all of a sudden they want a pool. I don't think we review that all that well. Whether or not they went for permission, I don't know. All I do know is the neighbors of that particular residence complained profusely to the HOA and got nowhere. And there were certain violations that were made while that pool was being built. Nothing was done about it. So I think it's important not just to set up the rules, which I think have to be refreshed for how things have changed, but I think we need to do a lot better job of policing. And if it means just having an expansion of the review board going out on occasions and various sections at a time to see exactly what's happening, that may be one suggestion, but I think it could be addressed and done a better job of policing, what's going on, and not just taking for granted the rules are there and follow them and we trust you. And we shouldn't have to rely on neighbors to report the problem. It ought to be something that we actually address. Thank you.
Thank you. Daphne?
I think from what I'm hearing, and I don't have a lot of personal experience with this, I just know that there is a lot of discussion in the community about enforcing covenants generally, is that our mindset, our systems were set up for monitoring new construction. You frame the house, you get somebody out to look at it. Is it correct? Did you have the right footprint? All those things. We don't really have a system that is geared to what's happening now. As you mentioned, Bob, is people buying the house and adding to it, changing, doing whatever. So I don't know how we, and potentially they're actually two separate issues, and how we look at that and how we monitor it. I would be concerned with setting up a police force to go and inspect too much. There's some resistance to the idea of inspections now, and I don't think we want to push that to the point where people resent this, because then I think it becomes counterproductive. This is a great idea. I realize that it doesn't help with what one would actually do, but I think there's a lot of tension around this question, and it needs to be sort of handled somewhat cautiously.
Okay, thank you. Roy Masson?
I'll make 2 points actually in addition to a couple that have already been made. Is that the problem really is making sure that folks have the knowledge about what the requirements are, okay? And preventing the problem up front has probably the best possibility of success of addressing this problem. So I really think that the applicant, and I'm going to phrase it that way, has knowledge requirements that are maybe not being met here, okay? And I'm going to take this all the way back to technology. Is that yes, indeed, I can go to the FCHOA website and dig through how many pages to find out what the issue might be to put in a pool, okay, and what my requirements might be. But frankly, it's a little bit like we're farming and it's the 20s and we're deciding that our horse is okay, while everybody else is using a tractor, okay? When that happens, what happens to your farm? It goes away. And that's what's happening with our website, okay? If it's so difficult to get the information that we need, people don't look for it and people don't get it, okay? And all that does is start a whole cascade of problems and issues that then are addressed by things that are negative, like police forces, finding to do enforcement, etc. It doesn't work, okay? We really need to do a better job of making that information available to folks and make it easy for them to get it and also to understand.
Thank you, Roy. Ray Van Cott?
So for the first time, I'm going to disagree with one of my colleagues here. Yes, it's hard to find on the website. It's information on covenants and for what you can build and what you're not. However, it's very easy to dial one phone number and talk to the people at the CSB and get the same information. And if you don't want to use the website, get it in writing and sent to you. So I think we're talking about two different things. We're talking about ARC, building standards, and we're talking about covenants. Building standards, when someone goes to build here, deposits, we enforce a rather substantial deposit surety type of bond structure against the building to make sure it complies. Now, does everyone follow that? No. And for that, we have financial penalties, and if it may not be enough, we've argued on the board level that maybe we need to increase them, but we do have it. Covenant enforcement, as Daphne said, that is really a tough thing. If my first Talk of the Colony article was on covenant enforcement, and we have a very passive, I consider it a passive approach to covenant enforcement, whereby when a house is being transferred, ownership's being transferred, you are required to do an inspection. The inspection looks at whether or not there are any covenant violations. If there are, you have to correct them prior to sale, or we don't allow the sale to go through. And so we've held up a number of closings because of that. Now, is that the best way to do it? I don't think so, but it is the way we're currently doing it now. Having covenant police is something that I struggle with. I mean, someone can drive through any street and find someone who's got some type of covenant violation. And how do we fix that? Do we send police out, or do we have a covenant force or not? And I think it's one that we have to discuss, but I'm not happy with the current level of covenant enforcement and the issues that it creates as we see continually in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Okay, we have a new question and a new topic, and the topic is safety. And first, this will go to Bob Boggio first. While exceeding the posted speed limit is a serious issue within Ford's Colony, the running of stop signs is an epidemic. To residents of all ages and genders, a stop sign seems a mere suggestion. Do you agree that this is a significant safety issue, and what actions should be taken? Bob?
I think we've experienced a number of activities that were focused on safety, speed being the one in particular that comes to mind. And we went through a couple of different approaches. Speed tables didn't work. The problem I think they had with that is they didn't listen. There were suggestions made that we wound up using and wound up aborting on the speed tables. We wound up leaving one of 3, and there's 2 sitting in a warehouse someplace. I don't think the ideas were vetted very well. I think it's a serious issue. We went with some trailers with monitoring, and some of that was suggested at the time the speed tables came up. And frankly, they were even suggested to have video capabilities. That's what we're winding up using now. We also have monitoring being done by some of our staff and even some police to monitor speed. But I think we should have gone earlier with the trailers and the capability of video and the ability to set citations in place for people that violate it, some of which are residents here, which is embarrassing as heck. People do have a responsibility, and not just for their own convenience. They need to take into account the safety of others. And a stop sign is there for a reason. I think rolling stops need to be thought about carefully. I think we're in the right place, but I think the activity we now have in place for monitoring speed has made some improvements in the safety of everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Daphne?
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a tough topic generally. I know on speeding, we are somewhat limited in how forcefully we can enforce things. And certainly on stop signs, I don't think we have a whole lot more latitude. To be blunt about it, I think if there is an epidemic out there, one of the things that one generally does in any environment is you do something short and sharp now to try and reset the expectations. And we do invite James City County Police in to patrol, or at the moment they're doing speeding. Perhaps it would make sense to have them enforce for a while the stop signs. Try and reset this expectation that apparently is out there that you can just roll through the stop sign without any penalty. We don't have cameras, we don't have trailers on monitoring the stop signs. And maybe that's a way that we could just reset the expectations quickly.
Thank you, Daphne. Roy Madsen?
Comment I'll make just on safety or safety and speeding, et cetera, overall, is that, over the past couple of years, that's one of the issues that's really pretty prevalent in the resident survey. A year ago, okay, yes, indeed, there were questions like the one that we just had or concerns raised, as well as lots of people who thought that we were going too slow. What was interesting about that is that they were pretty balanced, okay, is that the complaints on both ends of the spectrum were about the same, which meant that we were probably doing the right thing. This year, that's not true. There's lots of concern about safety. So that question's really, really to the point for right now. And we see it in everything. It isn't just the stop signs, okay? It is the speeding. There is more speeding, okay? And on top of that is that we have people walking everywhere around the streets, okay? And so all of the behavior has been somewhat changed because of the environment that we are in. How do we address it? One has to be, we just have to communicate. We have to rely upon folks' own sense of responsibility for them not to do it. And then secondly, is that yes, there probably should be some selective enforcement. And I'll go back to what Bob was saying. Sure, let's put a trailer next to a couple of those stop signs, okay? And let's send out a couple of letters, because it'll slow down a bit. Because I think the ghosting of stop signs is probably a bigger issue for residents, okay, than it is for contractors.
Thank you, Roy. Ray Van Cott?
All right, so if we go back, speeding has been an issue, and I think that Roy actually hit the nail on the head, because I was actually going to make the same comment that last year we actually found that for every comment we had complaining about speeding, we had an equal comment saying that it's too slow driving through the roads. That has changed this year. It's sort of timely, because the security committee delivered to the board this past meeting a work paper on speeding and violations in Ford's Colony with recommendations on what they wanted to do to improve it, which includes increased enforcement. A lot of people are not aware, but James City County does not patrol the whole of Ford's Colony. We are a private community, and frankly, a number of years ago, a local magistrate basically limited what roads that the James City County could actually ticket and police on, and those are the roads that they go to. They don't do the whole Ford's Colony. Our stop signs at one point in time were considered non-conforming. That has changed. Our speed limit signs were non-conforming. That has changed. I believe you're going to continue to see a greater use of cameras. 5 years ago, cameras were less than 80% efficient in capturing the data you needed to do to cite someone for speeding here in Ford's Colony. That actually has improved, and you're going to see more cameras being put in place. In the renewed management agent committee, rather contract, the managing agent actually had to increase the number of people who were trained and licensed, if you will, certified to use radar equipment, and that has increased. So you're going to see an increased emphasis on this, but it's always going to be ongoing. It really is up to individuals, and we have to continue to communicate that, as you see in the talk of the colony, and continue to try and increase our enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Rick Beers?
I'm going to limit, I think I'm going to limit my response to the question to the specific question raised, which was stop signs. Certainly all of the comments that have been made ahead of me have dealt very, very well to speeds themselves. But on the particular question of stop signs, I guess I have two ways to answer it. The first is mea culpa. I'll do that right now. I do rolling stops to me at certain intersections are things I do habitually, and I need to change. I need to change that, and we need to communicate it out. I know this doesn't get to everybody, but somehow the behavior of stop signs need to change. We need to somehow find a way to communicate it out. I'll be the first one to say that, and again, because I'm a perfect example. I know that there are reasons why stop signs are in residential. I know there are reasons, but I don't like them. To me, if we are going to want to enforce stop, those signs should be red. I don't care. I know there are architectural reasons for them to be blue. So I deal with education. I deal with the signage itself. I'm really, on the last issue, which is James City County, I just don't want those police cars in our neighborhoods. I just, to me, it's an admission that we can't manage it ourselves. And I just hate admitting that. I hate seeing it. And I think there are steps we can continue to take in before we resort to bringing in more county enforcement. But we need to paint those signs red.
Thank you, Rick. The next question is going to be going to Daphne Kinkle first, and the category is budget finance. What changes to the FCHOA budgeting process would you recommend to make the process easier for the residents to understand?
Wow. We changed a lot about the budget process this year. I think it made it easier for most people to understand. Having said that, there is still outreach work I think we need to do to explain where the numbers come from, what they mean, how we track them. It's the usual communications. And I think, to be honest, these were virtual meetings, and the information was published and nobody came. And so I hate to say it, it's several hours out of your life, but most people who sat through them have said, I did learn a lot. So this is a two-way thing. We need to work harder, and I think, to be honest, folks need to work a little harder. And the big thing is, obviously communicating out results and meaning, which kind of is off the topic, but I just wanted to say that I think it's so important that so much of what we've said today is about communications. A lot of these questions seem to come from a lack of communication, and a lot of our answers on how to deal with them come with communications. And so it's critical, and this is just another example of where we need to do better on both sides communicating.
Thank you. Roy?
This is an issue that I find fascinating because it's one that I've dealt with my entire career. I'm just going to say it that way. Is that basically our finances and our budget is a very complex document. And the effort that the Finance Committee and Ray and the things that you've done a good job of trying to make it understandable. But, you know, we're still going to have to work at it. We're still going to have to communicate, okay? We're still going to have to try to reduce it into ready concepts that people understand. We're dealing with a budget that has multiple funds and all that craziness, okay? And that's something that most people don't deal with. And what they would like to see it in a way that it's A minus B equals C. And we've got to figure out a way to marry those two things to make it work a little bit better. But having said that, I will tell you, I think we've been doing a pretty good job.
Thank you. Ray?
This is a tough one for me to actually comment on, right? Because it was my responsibility this year to do that communication, and frankly, you know, in pure honesty, I think that I did the best job I could have given the complexity of the subject. I spent a great deal of time trying to reduce the complexity to blocks of information that could be understood. Now, could I have done better? Certainly. I mean, these are complex things, and frankly, it's my job, and it's the job of the Finance Committee and the people who talk about budget it's their job to figure out a way to communicate how all this works in a fashion that people can understand. I gave it my best shot there, and frankly, you know, I knew that it would fall short in some areas, and I apologize for that. And frankly, I look to whatever suggestions, if I'm asked to do something again, whatever suggestions I could pick up to do that better. But it is complex, and in this particular case, you know, I tried the best I can. Now, I will tell you that I had somewhere under, I think, 400 people who listened or actually viewed the online presentation. It didn't quite go viral because I understand I need like over 1 million people to do that. But I did have over 400, and that probably, if I subtract the 3 or 4 times that I listened to it to see if I could have done better, you know, maybe move that down. But it's a tough thing. It's one you've got to constantly work at, and that's what we try and do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Rick?
I am the only non-financial person running for the board. These 4 folks that have preceded me, or at least 3, and then Bob's following, there's no way that I could even pretend to add content to this discussion, other than to tell Ray and Daphne, don't apologize for anything. I think this is you're on a road right now. You've gotten maybe halfway there. There's progress that's been made, progress that would continue. It's just a tough topic. I would, however, because I can't stay quiet on anything. You know, I got a couple of things I could look at. One is, I remember Social Security discussions 10, 15 years ago, where Al Gore, I don't remember the year, I remember it like it was yesterday, said, what we need is a lockbox. I don't know if any of you remember that, but what we need is a lockbox, and it's real simple. Money in, money out. I think we're a little more complicated than that. So maybe we're a little more complicated than Social Security, and I'd encourage the group. I think, seriously, the survey did point this out again, that this is an area that we need to get at. And during the survey reviews that are going to occur this month and next month, my suggestion was going to be that on the topic of financial understanding within the community, it's time for a focus group. It's time to get a cross-section of residents together, try to find those who haven't participated in the discussions, and find out what we can do to do better. I think it's time, and I'd like to see it happen. That's it.
Okay. Bob Boccio?
I agree with some of what Rick just said. I don't put myself in the finance bucket, although I have a lot of finance training. I think we need to be real here. This is a $6 million operation. It is not that complicated. we try to make it complicated. But I have to say, Daphne and Ray, you guys did a fabulous job this past year. I mean, I watched Daphne, I participated with her on the Finance Committee. We made a very serious attempt at trying to re-engineer the way we do the budget. And Ray, you did an outstanding job of trying to explain it. Very difficult to explain to people that don't have a clue about finances. Now, the third part I would say is the person asking this question needs some self-examination. We communicate, we yell in a pipe, and there's nobody at the other end. That person could show up at any one of the Finance Committee meetings. They could show up at our Board of Directors meetings. They're invited. They don't come, and they complain. I don't know if they're looking for spoon feeding or what. But this is not a very complicated financial situation here. I appreciate the question, but I think that person asking the question needs to think about how they would like to get the information and not so much criticize those that are giving out the information in a very professional way. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Bob. The next question will first go to Roy Madsen, and the category is Board of Directors. What will you focus on during your term? How will you measure your progress? Roy?
I think we've talked about a lot of things that that probably does need some focus. There's really, I'm going to look a little bit more from a process perspective to start with. Okay, first of all, is that I think that we need to have more broad input to many of the issues that the colony faces. A good start of the information that we have received from the resident survey. Other tools that are connected with that are things that we can use to address some of the issues that have kind of been raised. Using one example is that there's a lot of discussion about various activities that should be put forward at Forts Colony, be it a bubble over a swimming pool, okay, or a fitness facility. There's major questions that are connected with that, such as how do we pay for it is a big one, and who's going to use it, okay, and who, you know, et cetera. And to get answers to that, we really have to have a better understanding about what people think. The second part is something that I've raised here a little bit, and that says that I would like to see a little more risk management in our discussions. And risk management, in my mind, is understanding what the current state is and how it will be affected by the environment going forward. It comes back a little bit of the thing I said about the pipes. And then lastly is that I think we need to have a little bit more of a strategic focus so that we can meld where we're going with what we have to address now. Now, when it gets down to the specifics, you know, and some of those operational items, that's all going to come out of a discussion that we have when the board meets to begin with to determine what the goals and the objectives are for 2021, as well as what they should be moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Ray, you're next.
Thank you. I'm going to start like I started last year, which is really the survey. The survey is our input from our residents. This is really the one place or the one thing that we get a lot more people who voice their opinion. People who our meetings tend to have, you know, very personal things in mind when they do that. The survey is broad on that. Last year I did this, and I'm actually in the process of doing this now. Reading all the comments, because a score is one thing, comments are another. To understand what people find important, and then once I collate that, that's what I'll use moving forward. Now, last year after I did that, I was asked to become the treasurer, and frankly, the treasurer is close to a full-time job as anything you would have here in Forts Colony, and so I did sort of lessen my impact of looking at the list I put together, and I start working more as the treasurer. But I'm reviewing the comments on the survey now and putting together what I think are important points made, and we'll take. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You're next.
couple of things that I'd like to see, a couple of things that I would like to focus on next year, if I may, is tightening up and moving forward the the board goal setting process. Right now, our goals are communicated out in April. That's too late. Over 1/4 of the year is gone. We need to move that process up. How do we move it up? Perhaps we change the way we look at goal setting so that the outgoing board, whose last meeting is January, lays out what their recommendations are to the new board, providing recommended goals, recommended areas of focus, so that the new board, when it takes over in February, has a baseline. That, I think, would speed up the process. I think then we have to look at the inputs into the goal setting process, inputs such as the survey. Let's move the survey up earlier so that we have time to get community input through the survey in advance of that goal setting process, so we have time to just digest it. I think we have to look at other areas of bringing in community comment more than just the survey. I'd like, and I mentioned something earlier, I'd like to expand our use of focus groups. I just think that we should be doing them on a more ongoing basis, simply to gain spontaneous input, because that's really where the knowledge is just getting people to come out of their shell and open up and talk. So moving the survey up, having targeted focus groups to gain community input. Roy's comment about risk analysis, definitely on. We need to continually look at those risks, update those risks, and bring that into the goal setting process. Start that goal setting process earlier, completing it earlier, and then finally measuring and publishing a 6-month position. Where are we? Letting the community know how we're progressing.
Thank you. Bob Boschio?
Excellent comments being made here. I think Rick made a good one. Setting goals in April is just too late, and his recommendation is not a bad one to pull it up. Maybe other ways to do that, but that's not a bad suggestion. My observations are that it seemed to do a pretty good job of dealing with problems that show up, the current stuff, and we make a valiant attempt at solving a particular problem. We don't do very well at looking beyond the current. What's the impact of the decision we made to solve today's problem, and what's that going to look like 5 years from now? I go back to the speed tables. We tried to solve the current problem. We didn't really do a very good job of vetting that. There are warnings all over the internet that those things are not solutions to anything. They're known to be noisy, and they turned out to be very noisy. And we had to deal then with the noise problem. So my plea is we need to be a little more careful about how we pick a solution to a current problem and try to be less myopic and looking down the road at what the impact of our decision is to solve that problem. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Daphne?
Listening to everybody, there's some really good comments here. What I think we probably all agree on is that the board really should be looking at the strategic issues, deciding issues that come out of the surveys, the direction of the community. As Bob says, let's not just make a decision today, let's consider what it does for us in the long run. The problem with that is that these folks meet and they have to decide. A lot of it becomes a discussion thing within this community, and small issues, things that really in a way are a little bit of a waste of these people's time. And it's part of our governance structure. They are the sole deciders, and only a few things get through on the consent agenda. Thank God the transfers, because Ray usually has at least half of those. They are on the consent agenda. I think perhaps thinking about more day-to-day items being recommended by the advisory committees and making their way to the consent agenda would give the board more time to deal with strategic issues and think ahead and really guide the community forward today's issues all the time. More personally, if I was elected to represent folks, my focus would be data-driven. I believe in making decisions based on data. I listen to people and try and get the right information and then collaborate to make sure that progress, if I haven't been shot by the end of the session, then I guess I succeeded. Thanks so much. That's my time.
Thank you, Daphne. We have a last question here. We've been here for a little over an hour right now, and the last question is going to go to Ray Van Cott, so he'll be the first one to answer it. And the category is Future of Ford's Colony / Vision. Will you describe your vision of Ford's Colony in the next 3 to 5 years? So Ray, why don't you go first?
All right, so my vision of Ford's Colony is that Ford's Colony remains the vibrant community that it's actually been built into. It is so easy for a community to go stale, especially a community that it's a private community like we are, where everything from the roadway through the infrastructure to the activities, everything is paid for by the individual. There is no government. So it's a community that we decide what we want. And I mentioned this when a question like this came up earlier. Freshness has to have a continuation. So the Ford's Colony that people moved into 10 years ago remains as vibrant to them and as important to them and as fresh to them as you move to the next 10 years. It is allowed to get stale. So my vision of Ford's Colony is frankly a continuation of the continued refreshment of the colony so that it remains vibrant and relevant to the next group of people who move in. I think if you're looking for more operational and practical matters, we are faced with some challenges coming into next with building. The Brian Ford apartments will have to be managed. Those will have to be managed, and they'll have to be managed in a way that they cause the least impact to the quality of life that we have now. There are other smaller parcels of land that fit the same category, where they're undeveloped and they're allowed to be multi-family, multi-generational. So the fact is, we've got those challenges in front of us that are real, and our goal should be the continued refreshment and vibrancy of our community that makes it relevant when we bought it 10 years ago, relevant today, and relevant as we move into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick, you're next.
Keeping it at a really high level, which is really what we need to do with this question, with the questions asked. What's the vision for the next 3 to 5 years? It's as much of what we do as how people feel. And I think I'd go after a question about vision in a couple of ways. The first is that our vision is to continue to sustain the resident experience. It's a term that I use. The resident experience is when we come through the gates, how we want to feel. We want to feel secure. We want to feel comfortable. We want a home. The resident experience is very, very critical for us to sustain in any regard. I think the second vision is that we continue and even increase the dynamism within the community. People don't want to feel anymore that they've retired and they're, just kind of coasting. People want to be involved. People want to be excited by the surroundings. People want to be challenged. And we need to send that message and back it up with the right services and amenities. And I think a third vision is probably to the future: adapt, change, know our target audience, know what we need to do to meet their needs, and then design the future state of the community to meet those changing requirements. And I think if it's a 3 to 5 year vision, it has to be a question of how do we update our design for the community? How do we update our expectations? So I think those are the 3 ways we get after it.
Thank you, Rick. Bob Boccio?
I think 3 to 5 years forward, we need to take into account what we've accomplished already. I mean, this community is 25 years old. We've done a pretty good job of small improvements, most of which have been I'd almost call unilateral improvements, not overall improvements. We've got some visions that we'd like to make this multi-generational. We've got a good start on that. I don't think we're attending to that as much as we think. One thing we keep getting confronted with is doing surveys and getting ideas of people and not having any idea how we're going to pay for it. So we've made some adjustments in how we think we would save for things such as that. I think the CIF that we've had, the Capital Improvement Fund, was a good attempt at that. It needs to be worked a little bit. But going forward, I think we need to make some minor adjustments going forward. I think we're doing very well with the community. It's very attractive when people come in. We've got plenty of activities. Nobody can complain that there aren't a lot of activities. It's pretty easy to start another one. I don't think we need any work in that arena. So I think we need to get a little more modern. And I expressed that with the IT idea earlier, that we need to refresh some of the things we do here to make it a little more current. But that's my vision going forward. Thank you.
Daphne?
I find this a really hard question to suggest it's a really good one. I think 3 to 5 years is a relatively short horizon if you want to try and state something that's different than what we have right now. So the 3 to 5 year horizon, I think for me, is that Ford's Colony would basically be what it is right now. But as Ray says, refreshed, and we need to keep current as we go. But I would not envision that Ford's Colony would anyway be significantly different than it is now in 3 to 5 years. It's a relatively short horizon if you're looking for a different statement than the current position. So that's sort of what I would say. I love Ford's Colony the way it is. We definitely need to change. Would it be exactly the same? No. If you asked in 20 years, then I think maybe it would need to be significantly different than it is now.
Okay, thank you. Roy?
I'm going to answer this just in a little different way, because I think this really speaks to a little bit of emotion. Years ago, when my wife and I were considering where we were going to live, okay, somebody came up to us and said, you should look at this place, someplace in Southern North Carolina, etc., because it's the 4th best community that you can live in. And we said, yeah, that's kind of nice, okay, etc. And my wife went back in and she started to look into all the things. And guess what the #1 place to live was Ford's Colony. Okay. So when I look at what should be happening as we go forward, is that when anybody is looking at a type of community where they want to consider to live, I want to see Ford's Colony being at the top. Okay. May not always be the very top, but I would like to have it be at the top. Okay. And that gets a little bit to what Ray was saying. It's got to be fresh. It's got to consider not only what people want today, it's got to consider what people want tomorrow, okay? And so it isn't necessarily a simple A, B, and C right now. Is that these are things that we've got to consider and think of so that whenever that question is asked, and it was asked in the survey, would you recommend Ford's Colony, is that we always get, okay, a top answer. Okay, if we do that, we're being a success.
Well, thank you, candidates, for an interesting and informative question and answer session. We covered a lot of topics, and we appreciate the time that you spent in expressing your views and positions.
If elected, this is going to be my 2nd term on the board. Typically, one's first term is spent learning and beginning to take on leadership responsibilities. So what have I learned? I've learned that the degree of diversity within Ford's Colony, and by diversity, I mean the diversity of backgrounds, skills, lifestyles, as well as ethnicity, is perhaps our core strength as a community. We refer to this as multi-generational, but I believe it's so much more. We need to better leverage that diversity. I've learned that the board needs to view residents of the community as its customers, and that the resident experience needs to be at a similar level of importance to other considerations such as operational and financial. I've learned that the developer is long gone, but we are still building out as envisioned in our master plan, accepted by James City County almost 40 years ago. We still have over 300 buildable lots within the gates, as well as 20 other parcels available for development. Westport is still building out, and the developer has just left. Ford's Village, a new community that will be part of our HOA, will offer a new lifestyle and a continuing care complex. Oversight and governance of this master plan is critical to our future. I've learned that the absolute value of a sound, conservative financial foundation. We were surprised to learn of the advanced degradation of our drainage infrastructure, or, if you will, pipes. But we have a healthy capital reserve fund and a relatively low level of operating costs. So we're overcoming that pipe problem with minimal financial impact to residents. And finally, I've learned the value of the community of its volunteers, but also the value of volunteering to the individual. Personally, I'm better as a result of actively volunteering, and I continue to do so, and to promote this value to others. So if reelected, I'll of course continue to focus on the things that are our core strengths, such as financial results and operational excellence. But in addition to that, I have a few items of personal interest that I thought I'd throw out, that I thought I'd discuss. First is that we need to formalize our processes managing our investment in new amenities and community capabilities. Just as we have a capital reserve fund to cover major maintenance and upgrades to existing infrastructure, such as roads and gas pipes, we should take a similar approach to future infrastructure, future amenities under consideration, such as Gordon Creek access. These are multi-year projects, and we need to tighten up our control of our ongoing investment fund or capital investment fund, and that'll be one of the early considerations of the new board. We need to develop a long-range information technology plan to guide the upgrade of our technology platform for their operational benefit, as well as to improve our resident experience. As an example, many of you are aware of Nextdoor. Many of you subscribe to it. However, it is a pure social platform, and it is wide open, not secure, and doesn't connect residents with the MA, with the HOA staff. There are technologies to do that, and it's time that we look at them as a successor to fchoa.org. And finally, I'd like to see us tighten our internal tracking of action items as the year progresses. Directors at large should be assigned focus areas, action items, and track. I mention these items not from a negative standpoint. I have a high degree of respect for our board, its governance processes, and its history. It's just that no matter how good you are, there are always ways to improve. I mentioned then, Brian, a little insight into what to expect if you vote to reelect me, which I certainly hope you do. Thank you.
We've got a lot to be proud of in Ford's County. We've experienced a difficult 2020, and we got some important issues to deal with in 2021 and beyond. We have drainage pipes that need serious attention. We also have a nature trail under continuous repair. We need to address an aging and dated IT infrastructure. We have folks anticipating the donation of the Gordon Creek property that will require some financial decisions. We also have a decision to be made regarding the future management of the recently established capital investment fund. The good news is that we have some dedicated and talented volunteers to address those challenges. One of the reasons that our quarterly dues have been so stable and competitive is due to our readily available source of capable volunteers managing our working committees and the board of directors. For that, we should all be grateful. I've detailed my background in previous communications. In 43 years of business, I've successfully managed in numerous global arenas, including the US, Europe, Middle East, and Asia. Each engagement had its own unique challenges. In my 8 years in Ford's County, I volunteered as treasurer of the Bowling League and Men's Golf Association, each for 2 years. I've contributed 4 budget cycles in 3.5 years as a member of the Finance Committee. In that role, I served as liaison to the management agent, the facilities, and roads and project maintenance committees. I've witnessed and contributed firsthand how the HOA operates. I've determined that my participation in the Finance Committee, although challenging, is not fully utilizing my expertise. I would like to expand my focus as a board member. My business experience can be utilized to complement our HOA and board of directors by suggesting management discipline improvements. For example, I'm encouraged by recent emphasis on cost reduction. This is an excellent start and needs to be a constant focus. I also recognize that the board of directors has made a concerted effort to improve their transparency with their coffee sessions. This should be expanded with other opportunities. I believe our review and vetting of new projects needs to be enhanced. Formal business cases have been utilized, but are focused primarily on the initial cost and do not appropriately delve into their long-term impact. Both are dues impacting. The long-term aspects last forever. Donations such as the Nature Trail and Gordon Creek should not be free from life cycle cost analyses. Further, such business cases need to be exposed to our HOA membership. They need to be given the opportunity to view and comment on how their money is being invested. Further, once approved, I suggest that a member of the board needs to be assigned to monitor a project's implementation. Once completed, a formal review should be done, including actual financial versus original estimates, and a list of learnings should be identified and documented. These needs to be accountable for our performance on a project. The learnings are intended to provide a means for continuous improvement, a constant goal. I can provide expertise to improving these key areas: business discipline, cost reduction, transparency, life cycle cost, accountability, and continuous improvement. We're fortunate to have 5 very qualified candidates considered in this election. Given my education, expertise, and diverse business acumen, I'm in a unique position to make an extraordinary contribution to this HOA board of directors. I'd appreciate your vote.
As we've moved through this process, there have been 3 formal pieces that the candidates have prepared. In my first, I outlined my qualifications and experience, including several years volunteering for the Finance Committee of the HOA, most recently as chair. In the second, I affirmed my strong belief in Ford's Colony and the people who live here and my interest in serving that community. In this final piece, I'm going to share the principles that have guided my work on the Finance Committee and that would guide my work if you elected me to represent you. It starts with an overarching view that Ford's Colony is a special place. And the priority is maintaining and enhancing what makes it special so that we remain and are considered to be highly desirable and a very satisfying place to live. It's a short and a long-term view. Undermining this are 3 pillars. These are the things I think are important and the things that if we manage them well, provide value to residents today and will drive value as we move forward. The first, it has to be our physical assets. This is where it starts. It's the first view of Ford's Colony. It's bricks driving through the gate. The campus and the recreational facilities significantly enhance our quality of life. Now and in the long term, they are the most visible element of our value proposition. Our finances. Not just because I'm an accountant, this underlies everything. For the folks who live here now, financial stability, conservative dues, and fiscal prudence are critical. But our financial position, which is very strong, is also a prerequisite for being a premier community. And finally, our community. We are a community. What makes it so? Well, for me, it's security, it's communications, it's the clubs and activities, and mechanisms for getting to know people, for being connected, and for putting down roots. Yes, we can and do keep in touch with our friends through social media, but we're still human beings. We want to connect. We want to know our neighbor. We not want to feel like we belong. Ford's Colony is unusually rich in this regard, and it's maybe part of the reason that so many of us feel so connected and strongly about it. As our demographics shift, I think we need to emphasize and respect community, the whole community, be inclusive. It's a key strength. It supports satisfaction with Ford's Colony. It's a value-enhancing differentiator. It's a less visible element of our value proposition, but it's important. As we move ahead, we're going to continue to be challenged to balance the short and the long-term needs within the 3 pillars and prioritizing across the three pillars. There are competing priorities just about everything we do. It's seldom one-dimensional. And I think it's important to recognize that, because I think the effective balancing is the key to maintaining and enhancing the value of this very special place. So how does it work in practice? I think it starts by listening, then you listen some more, and then you collaborate. And if you do that effectively, the answers start to come together. You can see the trade-offs, you can then balance and prioritize. And perhaps the big thing is at the end of the day, you can then communicate clearly what those priorities and balances are. If elected to represent you, would I get it right all the time? And no, I'm human. But I would do my very best on your behalf. Do my homework, listen, collaborate, focus on the end goal, and communicate. So thank you so much for your time and consideration now and over the process. Stay well, be safe.
Hi, Ford's Colony is the best place that Jean and I have ever lived. It has won its fair share of deserved accolades. So it's no surprise that in the resident survey, 9 in 10 of you cited that you're satisfied. You cited the environment, beauty, sense of security, and lifestyle, and you think it's well run. You deserve a pat in the back, as you are the community where we live, and for your volunteer efforts. The excellence continues despite its growth over the past 30 years. It retains those traits that make it so desirable. Approaching 6,000 residents today, Ford's Colony has become a small town. Like any small town, Ford's Colony needs to address its roads, security, technology, recreational opportunities, community buildings, and ensure the welfare of its residents. It needs to do those things within its means or its assessments. These are some of the things that we've already talked about today. The HOA board and its members are your stewards. They need to address operational items to maintain colony standards, ever-increasing needs and expectations of its residents, and expectations of the future residents, pardon me. Ford's Colony value is sustained when the board does that effectively and also address challenges like we have now. The first is demographic changes. How do we address demographic changes that influence what residents may be willing to pay for, how they are paid for, and what amenities should be available? How do we equitably meet the desires of our differing demographic components, such as young versus old, retired versus working, and children versus no children? The second challenge is resident wants. How do we address residents' desires for other amenities and facilities? Well, we have added items such as a bocce ball court. Others would like to see a fitness facility. New residents seek facilities that they are used to and not available here. Amenities and facilities make Ford's Colony attractive and valued, but must be addressed within our means. How do we ensure that? And then lastly, community infrastructure. How do we best manage our aging infrastructure, the buildings, the roads, equipment, and avoid untimely surprises? It has been maintained, but replacement and major maintenance may be required. Roads may need repaving, buildings re-roofed, tennis courts resurfaced, or playgrounds rehabilitated. Ford's Colony plans, schedules, and reserves for these types of expenditures. However, untimely failures like the pipes are problematic and costly. Are there any other issues that we do not know about? To address these challenges that we face, I advocate greater communication, transparency, and stakeholder input into HOA actions. These are all significant issues which require a broad consensus. And we, the board, need to remember who pays the bills. Secondly, I advocate an improved strategic focus and understanding that aligns current and future objectives that sustain Ford's Colony, both current and future value. And lastly, I advocate a risk management focus to address operational and strategic issues before they become major problems. Understanding and addressing potential issues is a great way to reduce and manage costs. My skills and experience align with the efforts necessary to ensure Ford's Colony is the community we all want it to be. I would like the opportunity to apply my skills to ensure Ford's Colony remains the community that we all value. Thank you for your support.
This February, my wife Helen and I are going to celebrate our 13th anniversary living here in Forts Colony. We chose Forts Colony because of everything it had to offer. It was really the premium place and premier place to live. Why am I running again? In my first election, I stressed that for many of us, our homes represent our largest investment. The value of this investment is directly tied to the appearance, both visual and physical, of Forts Colony to visitors and prospective residents. I think we've all driven through communities like Forts Colony that have just aged. The landscaping has gotten tired, the physical facilities have seen better days and have not grown. This cannot be Forts Colony. The board that's leaving this year joins previous boards in that they dedicate themselves to not only managing the aging infrastructure, but growing the beauty and usefulness of our facilities. This dedication must continue. As a reminder, my priorities that are in the Talk of the Colony relentlessly drive fiscal responsibility and conservation. It is our money. Continue to aggressively address our aging infrastructure. Sustain the value of our properties and community by emphasizing a positive visual appearance throughout Forts Colony. Enhance communication, respect different viewpoints, enable open discussion. And finally, maintain and enhance community connections with local government, schools, country club, and the Marriott. I thank everyone for their questions. They reflected your care and desire to live in a vibrant community. I also want to thank you for taking the time to not only watch this video, but the earlier introduction video recorded in December. Hopefully you've listened and learned enough to help you with your decision. Forts Colony runs on volunteerism. Without volunteers, the community we all love would cease to exist. So I want to thank my fellow co-nominees for their candidacy and willingness to continue our volunteer tradition. I believe I've shown that I have the credentials and experience to continue to serve you effectively on the board of directors, and I ask for your support.